Greetings, greetings, welcome. It's another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. All is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, come on in. All is a blessing. Welcome. Coming back to you. I'm longing for my family. Coming back to you. Out of bondage and now I am free. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Greetings, greetings, beloved. Greetings, Tasha. Greetings, Kim. Greetings, welcome. Come on in. All is a blessing. All is a blessing. Come on in. Come back home. Greetings, Ghana. Greetings, Nigeria. Greetings, Ethiopia. Yes, all is a blessing. Greetings, India. Welcome, Blog Talk Radio, 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. Greetings. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon. Great day wherever you are. Come on in. Ashe. Alafia. Welcome. Greetings, beloved. Greetings. Welcome, Florida. Welcome. All is a blessing. Come right on in. I'll be forward momentarily. Come right on in. Yes. All is a blessing. Greetings, divine all blessed. Eshu alegbuana ko siwere awo onlo uto ni iwo ada afan bo osi obatala mi ita ni ibo onilio aban eshu. Eshu is the respected elder who flogs, confronts, and uncovers fools. That one versed in mysteries uses truth to own you. He causes scatter to feed poverty. Obatala shakes rascals to have sacrifice. The owner of warnings is the one who is Eshu, Aboru, Aboye, Aboshishe, Ashe. May our Ebo reach a rune. May our Ebo be accepted. May our Ebo allow what we desire to come to pass. And so we say, Ashe. Greetings, divine all blessed, peace and love, joy and prosperity You are now sitting live with the Divine Prince, Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye Hoodoo Obeya Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. If you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is indeed my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, reiteration, and it is my personal ever-living reality. It is crucial to the very foundation of my inner standing, my being, my walk, my work along this divine, all blessed life path and journey, my demonstration, and it is indeed how I begin and end all my endeavors. Understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe. Today is Thursday, September 3rd, 2020, and I am emanating and vibrating with you and for you live, virtually, verbally, cosmically, quantum, universally from this working temple of the House of the Divine Prince. Thai Potions, Hoodoo Central, Black Hawk Voodoo, in this legendary, historic, beautiful, and most enchanted city in America, New Orleans, Louisiana, the land of my ancestors and those who came before me along this Hoodoo Obeya life path and journey, passing down the great Obeya stick along with the knowledge of the life-giving herbs, roots, plants, rituals, spirits, minerals, indeed the traditions, the legacy, the heritage, our stories, our sacred stories. And I invite you to continue to visit us and support us at www.oursacredstories.com. O-U-R, sacred, S-A-C-R-E-D, stories, S-T-O-R-I-E-S.com. All is truly and indeed a blessing. As always, I am grateful for the ancestors that continue to show up and show up. I'm grateful for the ancestors seen and unseen. But in this season of my birthday and Marie Laveau's birthday and the coming fall season where we tend to see a lot of Halloween and witchery and bewitchery and all sorts of mixing of things as we go closer into the colder regions, go closer into the winter months. But we tend to see a great deal more in commercialism, entertainment, television, that take the liberties, to creative liberties, I might add, to sort of play around with what voodoo is or is not, what traditional African religion is or is not. And indeed, we being practitioners, authentic practitioners who walk not only in the heritage and lineage of our ancestors, but also who represent the world traditions as we know them. It is not for us to take liberty with these traditions, but to present them in the most precise, the most accurate, the most humble, the most righteous perspective, so that the bastardization thereof, the appropriation thereof does not continue. And understand, it has been so since day one. That's not new. The shenanigans, unfortunately, are not new, but the opportunity for us to take a more solid position on our traditions continues to renew and be reborn with the technology and with the archaeological and documentation that we are able to find and locate. As we continue to move forward, I would like to remind you and introduce to some of you who may not know, Marie Laveau, whose birthday is celebrated on September 10th. Her birthday is September 10th. Marie Laveau was just a myth, was just a conversation, was just a subject matter tossed around in books with a great degree of creative license until Enya Fritnick came to New Orleans and conjured her up, if you will, found the hardcore archaeological documentation of her footprint. But let's be clear. And in this moment, on the great and mighty shoulders of ancestors of which we now stand, and particularly those of you who have ancestry, as I do in Louisiana, whose ancestors came through the port of Louisiana, who may have been born in Louisiana, we take the time to acknowledge the ancestors as specifically as we can, known and unknown. It's great to be able to call out ancestral names. It's great to be able to tie ourselves to ancestral lineage by way of direct bloodline to very specific ancestral names. But as we go back to the motherland, let's not forget the ethnic names. Let's not forget the Fon, and let's not forget the Bambara, and let's not forget the Mandinka, and the Wolof, and the Ewe, and the Fulbe, and the Yoruba, and the Chamba, and the Congo, and the Igbo, and the Odu, and the Hausa, and the many families who were brought by way of forced migration, if you will, enslavement into the Middle Passage, into this new world. And I'm very specific right now. I'm talking about Louisiana. I'm talking about Louisiana. As early as 1719 to 1731, the majority of captive Africans brought to this region of the world were from those very ethnic groups, those very families that I just enumerated. The Fon, the Ewe, the Igbo, the Yoruba, the Hausa. And I've said it on many shows before this, and I'm sure I will have to continue to say it for many shows after this. If you can count in Fulbe, if you can count in Yoruba, if you can count in Igbo, you're now only being forced to learn to count in another language, in a new language, in the oppressor's language. But indeed, you can count. And what we have that is unique to New Orleans is Congo Square. Congo Square, which have provided for us a place, and Congo Square has been called many things. You can do the homework. I've done this show too many times over the last decade and a half, to get picked at for word usage. Okay, Congo Square has been called many things, but its purpose remains unified. Its purpose remains true. Its purpose remains alive even till this day. So we give acknowledgement to ancestors. That's what we do, right? We show ancestral honor and acknowledgement in this space, this shared space that is ATR. But let's be specific. How specific can you be? How specific can we be? And I offer that you do the work. I know many in my house who are doing the work. And indeed, that ancestral work and divination cannot be overstated, for its ability to not just clarify who we are, but also to clarify our journey and our purpose and our destiny. I found in my journey that if I was spinning my wheels, especially in my younger years, not sure of where to go and what to do and what to look for, I always go back to the root. I always go back to the ancestors. And so that has been my story. That has been my experience. And that has also been the shared experience of many who have ventured into ATR, traditional African-based religious systems, in earnest and in truth. And there are nations indeed that are opening up a doorway, a gateway, if you will, to embrace the returning African American in the diaspora, the returning African in the diaspora, not just the Africans in America, but the Africans in the diaspora. There are many nations, Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, that are opening their doorway for allowing that to happen, for allowing that to manifest. And for those who are indeed fortunate enough, blessed enough, reserved enough, organized enough, you know, to make that journey, I invite you to make that journey. Now, I don't know if that journey is going to happen this January in the season of COVID, but indeed, every January, there's a Voodoo festival that embraces the returning African American in January. And then every June, which is the New Year season for the Yoruba people, there are a series of festivals that take place in Nigeria, in various regions of Nigeria in the month of June, to also commemorate the beginning and the ending of a new year, but provide an opportunity to get an introduction, develop some connection to ancestral lineage, ancestral roots. And I've challenged over the years how much of that can be done in a weekend, or in a week, or in 2 weeks, or blessed be a month or 2 months. Not many people have the wherewithal, the resources to travel anywhere for 2 months annually out of the year. Many of us haven't taken a vacation in years. I'm one of those people. Many of us can't afford to travel, afford vacation. So how much does that play a role in the African born in America, their ability to connect to their ancestral root, their ability to connect to their bloodline and their lineage? I've been teaching, some would say preaching, for years, that we've got to get out of this sort of subjugation, this bondage, if you will, because it's a form of bondage. You know, you move from one oppressor to the other, one master to the other, you know, one controller to the other. And sometimes it masks itself in things that are familiar. Sometimes we break out, you know, thinking we're breaking out brand new, you know, and you repeat the same program that has not been dismantled, that has not been healed, that has not been fixed, that has not been repaired. So while I say sometimes daily, make sure that you remove the racism out of you. Make sure you remove the white supremacy out of you first, before then venturing out to anticipate and expect a whole and healed world. But I also ask, and I also challenge, that we find a way to open up an otherwise modern consciousness, Western consciousness, in many cases Christianized and Islamicized consciousness, and allow for something that's a little bit more of depth, something that's a little bit more indigenous. And in my relationships, my Skype relationships, you know, and my Instagram relationships with some of our brothers and sisters and cousins who occupy other parts of the world, within the Pan-African diaspora, the trans-African diaspora, I've come to realize that it's not just here. It's not just here. It's not just us. It's not just the African born in America. And indeed, I have the same level of conversation, sometimes much, much more so, with some of our brothers and sisters who are in Ghana, who are in Nigeria. In my communications in other lands, that's often one of the first questions that I ask is, how much do you know about the Middle Passage? How much do you know about the transatlantic slave trade? How much do you know about slavery and its lingering effects, not just on the African in America, but on the Nigerian, the Ghanaian, you know, the Congolese, you know, from various regions in the diaspora. And it's very interesting what information is not passed on, passed down, and what information is not taught, it's not shared. And so the idea that voodoo is somehow crafted in Haiti and then imported to New Orleans is something, unfortunately, that we'll have to continue to undo for many generations to come, as long as there aren't any new generation of archaeologists and book writers and students who are willing to do the same degree of work that was done to expose who Marie Laveau was authentically. We still require that. And when we think of the resources and the money in the world and how they're spent in terms of history, culture, tradition, archaeology, you know, Mayan ruins and Inca ruins are real entertaining for people, are real exciting. But the roots of traditional African-based religious systems among a once enslaved population in Southern America is still not high on the priority list for many of the scholars that are coming up now. So indeed, those students, those scholars who are coming up now, there's room for you to do that work. There's room for you to continue some of the work that's already been done. So with that many ethnic groups, powerful ethnic groups, rich ethnic groups, culturally, figuratively, and literally rich ethnic groups present, coming aboard, coming across through the Middle Passage. How do we continue a narrative that we somehow had amnesia until 1791? For those of you unfamiliar, 1791 would be the Haitian Revolution. How do we then say that we somehow had amnesia here until that event? That event indeed was a powerful one. The Grand Bois, the Haitian Revolution, not the Grand Bois, the Bois Cayman. The Bois Cayman, the Haitian Revolution was indeed a powerful event in the Western Hemisphere, indeed in terms of slavery, indeed in terms of independence and freedom. And the region, I've often said, whether you're talking about Haiti, Jamaica, Brazil, the region allowed for a greater degree of isolation and mobility by the Maroons, well-documented Maroon cultures, Maroon histories. But that Maroon culture and history that exists right here in Louisiana, right here in Mississippi, right here in the swamps, is still very understudied, even at the academic level, even at the university level. If we're still counting Black history in terms of 28 days, 1 month out of the year, then I'm sure we are still, even walking into 2021, not seeing really full buffet table of books and study and knowledge and wisdom about African culture and tradition, and particularly again here in America. We still are operating under a system that says white is right, Black needs to get back, brown, you might be able to get down. Some of us are old enough to remember that phraseology. And so it trickles down, if you will, just like BS, it trickles down, you know, to religion, spirituality and religion. I pray I'm coming through clearly on Blog Talk Radio. The direct connect is not functioning, so I'm using Skype. So I hope I'm coming through clearly on the Blog Talk Radio line, 845-277-9143. Do press the number 1 when you're ready with your question, comment, or request, and I'll be more than happy to unmute your mic. You're also welcome to follow the link at the bottom of the screen and join me here if you will. If not, all is a blessing. Listen, for my new participants, I've been doing this for 12 years, getting ready to go into 13 years. There was a time there was no audience, there was no background, there was no open chat, there was no ability to bring other people into the show. And so I've laid a foundation of archive, verbally, audially, by way of Blog Talk Radio, without often having your input. The modern technology that we're now having to pay a great deal for allows us to bring other people into the show, other opinions into the show, other commentary into the show. And so I invite you to come on board with your questions or comments or your requests, or I will continue as I am, as I will. And so we have to consider the very thing that many of us still don't want to consider, black or white, particularly in a falsified post-racial America that's still dealing with race in September of 2020. We still don't want to confront slavery and all of its dirty, ugly facets and aspects of what it is, what it was, how it still shows up, in our society, in our diet, on our plate. And until we're able to do that, we won't be able to remove that, not even in religion, not even in spirituality. I've noticed in the most recent years, people are, growing sensitive to statuary. Who does it look like? Who does it represent? While at the same time, not quite understanding that there's a whole system hidden geographically in those iconography based on where you find them, whether we're talking Mexico or South America or Brazil or Cuba or Louisiana or Chicago. I think it's also important to consider when we think about this environment that these many ethnic groups, these many ancestors would have stepped into, that Louisiana was a much bigger region than how we sort of visualize Louisiana, and of course, New Orleans today. New Orleans has always been small, like a New York City, always been sort of limited. And if you understand, the historic French Quarter is the original city of New Orleans, if you will. As time moved forward, we expanded out a little bit more, upriver and into the Delta, and of course on both sides of the river, and then deeper into the Delta, leading from Louisiana into Mississippi is what I mean. And it was, and to some degree still is, the superhighway of America. I believe 60% of U.S. food goods and oil and gas goods are coming in through the port of New Orleans, and they are seeking to dredge the bottom of the river. Right now, there's a $1 billion, $1 million plan to dredge the bottom of the Mississippi River to move that sediment to allow deeper flow of water so that bigger ships can come in here moving forward. But it's always been, sort of a super city in a micro space with many tastes and languages and ideas passing in and out through it. We have to understand that from the very first enslaved ship to arrive in Louisiana and then forward, leading up to the 1791 Haitian Revolution, the Black population doubled, in some places tripled, that of the white slave-holding population. So there was a great deal of fear and anxiety and nightmares and wickedness that was stirred up along with the Haitian Revolution. We sort of honor the Haitian Revolution with being the breaking point, the introduction of true freedom and liberation in the New World. But that was problematic for us. You know, voodoo was already existing. We were already existing in a problematic environment here in Louisiana, and maintained our traditions, that which wasn't done in Congo Square, maintained our traditions quietly, privately, under the cuff, you know, behind the scenes. I see that space, that environment that allowed Lukumi to flourish, that allowed Haitian voodoo to flourish, manifesting very differently here in the South. And so we developed Wanga, and we developed Grigri, and we developed potions, and we developed a way to conceal, even yes, through Catholic iconology, to conceal an otherwise diverse and complex system of practices and traditions that were very specific to these ethnic groups. And let me be clear, the same, you know, bite of Benin, you know, the same Fan and Ewe, you know, ancestors that were being brought here were being brought to Haiti as well. So those of you who honor and acknowledge and worship Haitian voodoo, we the same people. We the same people, predating the Haitian Revolution. We are the same people, you know. So we've got to grow our knowledge. We have to grow our awareness beyond just what has been popularized, what has been pushed forward in previous decades to control and further keep a limit on the freedoms of Haitians, but also the freedoms of African Americans. They would still have you to believe you have no gods. They would still have you to believe you have no traditions. They would still have you to believe you come from nowhere but the red clay of Georgia, but the ground of the Carolinas, you know, but the orange crops of Florida, you know, that without that, we had no beginning other than that beginning that begins here. And that has been an accepted lie for many generations. But it's a new day. It's a new day. I would love to say my generation is the last generation to hear that, to have that reinforced upon them. My generation, those born between 66 and 69, 70, you know, those born after us, you have a great degree of technology and information that was not available to us. We indeed had to go on what was told, what was said, what was legend, what was spoken, what was passed down. There was very few references for that. And if I didn't make this clear early in the show, I'm describing something that is for us, the African and American in America, something we like to see as being in the past. But at the same time, I'm describing something that's happening right now in West Africa. Right now, right now. I introduced in the last show that I have friends in Ghana and in Senegal and in Nigeria. Almost anywhere there's internet, I have friends there on the continent. And I like to ask a lot of questions. And so it's, again, very interesting is the best word that I can come up with. What lies we've been told and what lies they've been told. What lies we've held on to and what lies they've held on to. West Africans, about ourselves, about each other. And so in this very Islamicized, Christianized, evangelical environment, there's not a whole lot of talk in Ghana, for instance, that we do here on this show. I would like to think that's why I have an audience there. That's why I have an audience in Nigeria. That's why I have an audience in South Africa. Regions that would otherwise have indigenous, powerful spirituality and tradition, but have been overcome much as we were, but we were overcome by religion much earlier on than we would say our brothers and sisters. They feigned religion to some degree, you know, to keep the man's foot off their back, to keep war, you know, away from their lands, only to subsequently implode and create wars among themselves. Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, you know, many of those coastal regions that are still sort of going back and forth. Liberia, this American created African nation, you know, who went through a brutal civil war in the 80s going into the 1990s. So you would be really shocked as an African American who thinks I'm here to find myself, who thinks I'm on this journey to connect to my ancestors, and that my ancestors somehow are living in much warmer climate than I am, you know, much richer toned skin than I am, you know, and that's just not always the case. It's just not always the case. You know, I'm reintroducing things that we take for granted in the West about Orisha and about Loa and about Voodoos, you know, things that we take for granted. And the idea that we can use our internet, you know, to share this information, to talk about this information, to learn this information, while at the same time wasting it over such foolishness. When we have brother and sister in Ethiopia, for instance, who can be imprisoned for a number of years because they don't like what you put on Facebook. They don't like what you shared about the COVID in the Twitter. And so there are nations with people who look just like you and me who are being imprisoned, brutalized for something that we take such liberties with and often take for granted. I'm in a new place every day, virtually. And many of us have been opened up to the virtual realities by way of COVID-19. And so we're learning all about Skype and Zoom and some of these other tools to connect and to learn about other people. The media, where I am in agreement with sort of the, yes, Shamafia, every part of us is waking up right now, and particularly in the season of COVID. I think that separation and isolation, I described this back in March, is very similar to going through an initiation. It's very similar to, you know, being somewhere and meditating and fasting, you know, for 40 days and 40 nights. Sort of this process of COVID isolation that many of us have had to sort of pass through. And it has had a profound effect on many people, both good and bad. Some very healthy ways, some not so healthy ways, you know. So I would like to think that, you know, I can further encourage us using the time that we have, the connections that we have, the technology that we have, to further what's real for us, what's true for us, and not just to further, you know, your pain, or to further, you know, your feelings of incapacity, you know, your feelings of not being empowered. Indeed, if you have internet, you are empowered. You are empowered in a way that there are people all over the world don't have access to. And so you have an opportunity to share your truth. Share your truth. I am not only in a different part of the world every day, but I'm in a different culture. So I don't just search Kenya, but you got to then choose a family. I say family in place of an ethnic group, you know, like the Maasai, for instance, or the Turkana. Those are ethnic groups. But choose, by all means, ethnic groups. And if you don't know any, then you search that country or a region in that country, and then you ask for a list of ethnic groups. And then you go into seeing the world from a very different place. It would be like coming to New Orleans and spending time with the Boudreaux or the Devereaux you know, and, you know, or the Kimbos, you know, and eating their gumbo and their jambalaya and their seafood, the way they cook it, the way they celebrate the holiday, the way they celebrate the river, the way they celebrate the environment. And so when we look at an ethnic group, something that we've been bleaching away in the US, expunging away in the US, even when we think about the numerous indigenous ethnic groups that predated America, we can only list off a few now that we say still are in existence, still are in survival. So there's been a concerted effort in the US, not just for the Blacks, not just for us, not just for the enslaved African, to water down ethnicity or to use ethnicity in a way that's destructive or isolating or elitist, if you will. We can choose any industrial city in America. We can choose any modern city in America. We can choose any ancient historic city in America, like New Orleans, and start looking at communities, neighborhoods by way of ethnic group. The Germans, the Irish Channel, the Italians, those mean very specific things in the city of New Orleans, very specific things. Even Creole, you know, what does that mean exactly? You know, and are we talking about Spanish Creole, French Creole, some combination of the two? You know, there's a whole layer beneath the surface, beneath what we know, beneath what we're taught, that we're having to relearn about ourselves. Just as many of us did not have an awareness of African history, Afro-American history, Negro history, Black history until 1970. And I'm old enough to be a product of that. I'm old enough to remember that transition. I'm old enough to remember going from a Dr. King to a Malcolm X, you know, to a Black Panther Party, to an NAACP and Urban League. I'm old enough to remember and have seen and felt and been party to those changes, those transitions. And all the way, since day one, I've been voodoo, all the way. And I've sought for, searched for, studied for, researched for the voodoo all the way. And where I was, meaning in terms of my consciousness, the voodoo met me there. The voodoo met me there. And so some of you are passing this now to your children and to your grandchildren and are teaching ancestors within your families. You know, take them to the museum. You know, you'd be surprised, these natural history museums sometimes have, you know, really detailed indigenous environments in which our children, like I was, can be exposed to. Not just Africa, but Asia, South America, you know. I was just fortunate to grow up in the DMV, Maryland, DC, Virginia area, and have exposure to the Smithsonian Institution, which was totally free. I don't know if that's the case still or not, but it was totally free back in the day. And so I was allowed to make that my playground. I was allowed to spend time there. People ask me all the time, you know, have you been to Africa? Not yet. Haven't even left the country yet. Many who are coming to the country find that surprising by way of the measure of what I know about their people, their lands, their traditions, their practices. And so, yes, I meet Ghanaians and Nigerians every day, who don't know anything about Orisha, who don't know anything about spirits. They can reference festivals, they can reference events, but when we start getting down into those details, often those details are seen as wicked in a Christian Nigeria, in an Islamic Nigeria. And we're still arguing over whether we have voodoo here or not. We're still arguing over whether Haiti owns all the voodoo in the New World. or not? While again, looking over Panama, looking over Guyana, looking over, Belize, looking over Brazil, looking over Mexico. I remember when I was studying African history at the university level, African history and Africans in America, and then finding out that the largest number of African slave or enslaved burial grounds are in Mexico. That was shocking to me. At 20, 21, 22, I had never heard that before. That was mind-boggling to me, particularly when we look at race and racism as it's demonstrated today, among certain ethnic groups. You're Black, you're Hispanic, you're Latino, you're Chicano, and depending on where you are in the southwestern U.S., it can be very complicated to someone who's not from the southwestern U.S. and doesn't understand the dynamics of such. You don't dare call, someone born in Puerto Rico a Mexican, and vice versa, any more than I would expect you to overlook the history, the background, the tradition of Yoruba, as opposed to the Ewe or the Fawn, etc. And that's what the Orisha Romantic community, that's what we do when we embrace and take on Orisha, as if that's all of it, without having done any lineage work, without having done any DNA work, without having done any cultural adaptation. Now, a cultural adaptation is, still controversial. There are communities from South America, from Brazil, from Cuba, from Puerto Rico that have a historic relationship with Nigeria and initiating and taking on Orisha. And that feeds sort of the hubris that we often experience in social media when it comes to African Americans and what we know or don't know about these traditions. And that further feeds the idea that somehow we don't have it. Somehow we're lacking that part, save for that which has been reintroduced to us, by a cousin. Yes, Lola Noble, we received our information not only by way of oral tradition, but repetition and demonstration. An example of that might be a song, for instance. So we might sing a song, wade in the water, children, wade in the water, God's gonna trouble water. Now, is that a Christian song? Is that a code song for escaping enslavement? What's all there? And that depends on your awareness. That depended on your knowledge. And so we, yes, passed it down orally. We sang it, we chanted it, we told stories about it, and passed that on. But it also was showing up in our behaviors. It's a reason, Grandma put that brand new broom over the door New Year's. It's a reason, you learned to throw salt over your shoulder. Where did that come from? And why? And why are you throwing salt over your shoulder but not paprika, or black pepper? Why is that? So we've lost connection to, and yes, voodoo and the idea of voodoo is or is not, further complicates the conversation. Because there's many things going on when we look at voodoo. Greetings, Neophyte Bokur.
Greetings, family. Man, it feels like a long time since I chimed in on anything right now. But yeah, great point. We have a lot of these traditions in our heritage in our family that we don't even take reference in. We don't think about um, where some of these kind of quirky little things that we do come from. One of my favorite examples to bring up is Kumbaya. Kumbaya. You know, we get that, we sing that song, and that's an old kind of Negro spiritual, if you will. But that's Gullah Geechee. That's come by here, right? Come by here is what that is. It's just that in English we can't say it with that heavy accent that they have, so it gets translated to kumbaya, right? And there's a ton of them, a ton of those things, and that's just in the American side. We don't even think about half of the little quirky things that we take for granted in our traditions, like the boogeyman, for example. The boogeyman is the Australian people, right? How did they get turned into the boogeyman? Well, pirates and the British come and sail past their island. They see these men dressed, painted all in ash white, swinging planks of wood that make this weird sound. Is how they communicate between their families from one side of their landmass to the other. They're gonna think, oh my God, these are cannibals. These are some people that are gonna eat me. Well, you come on the island, you're gonna find out you're the enemy and not the guest. You get this story of the boogeyman. Right?
I agree. There was a great deal of misrepresentation based on what the white man saw and understood or misunderstood. And in most cases, it was a misunderstanding. Even when we look at that N word and how that came up out of a grave misunderstanding of language, of spelling, of even meaning. And so they then created what they wanted it to mean. They then created what they wanted it to look like and to represent. I had to mute you because it's such a terrible echo when I'm talking. I'll unmute you again as soon as I stop talking. Neophyte. Yeah, so I agree with you about that whole, boogeyman, scary man, slender man. What's the black movie? Candyman, are all
that's another one.
Yeah, all appropriations really of misunderstood African technology. I'm laughing now because I'm hearing the words that I'm saying, and I watch a lot of those alien programs, and they often say, misunderstood alien technology. How do we know that this ancient practice, this ancient tradition, this ancient product is not some misunderstood ancient technology? Well, we could say the exact same thing about the manifestation of all these various ethnic families in the New World, and then misrepresented, misunderstood African technology. And indeed, we can look at it from a very technological perspective. Where do we get our food from? Where do we get watermelon? Where do we get yams and sweet potatoes from? How do we learn how to grow rice here? All these things was imported along with us from West.
That was a good one right there, because I made that dire mistake one time. My wife sent me out shopping for yams, right? And I made the dire mistake of bringing back sweet potatoes, right? She clearly asked for yams, and I brought back sweet potatoes. Now, how many people have made that mistake and didn't realize that there was a good reason historically why most African Americans get that confused, when we're the ones that actually we eat this stuff. We ate this stuff.
It's also been grossly misrepresented.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yes.
What you think you buying is sweet potatoes, it's not. And sometimes when you think you buying yams, you really buying some sweet potatoes. It's grossly misrepresented at the commercial level.
Yes, that was a commercial mistake where they the funny story that I got out of it was that the fact that the slave drivers were trying to figure out what to feed black people. Black people brought yams from across that ocean, right? And it grew better than the potatoes. And when they went to market after they were selling it, they didn't know what to call it. They weren't listening to what the slaves were calling it because they didn't call it yams or sweet potatoes. But they put that sign in front of it and sold it as such, right? And when you see that sign, when you go to your grocery store and you see that the sweet potatoes and the yams are in the same spot, you should be offended.
Mm-hmm.
You should be very offended.
Listen, the question is being asked, what made them hate us so much? What made them hate us so much?
I think it has something to do with what we are in general. I don't want to turn it into a sex thing, but you know, we are powerful in so many ways that is baffling to most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? It is completely an utter strangeness to outside. I guess you can say ethnicities to realize that black people with our many diverse forms are powerful in every sense of the way. We come from a continent that is literally the fuel source for the entire economy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we are still considered at the bottom of that totem pole.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
like really, if we decide to actually stand up from the bottom of this totem pole, shit changes. Excuse my French.
And you know what? And I agree with that. I think we've shown small demonstrations of that. For
Yes.
example, why is it that the Koreans descend on our community, Sally Beauty Supply, hair weave? You know,
Well,
I'm old enough to remember a time when there wasn't no Sally Beauty Supply in the black neighborhood. I'm old enough to remember that. I'm old enough to remember when you went to Woolworths with everybody else and you went to the very bottom shelf and there might have been 2 or 3 items on there that was for black people at all. And so
yeah.
what I'm making is I think we've shown small representations of that. So they know how important hair is to you, how important hair care products are to you. And now they're streamlining that in to your neighborhood, okay? And taking that money back outside your community to somewhere else. So we've demonstrated in small gestures the value of our work. What we have not done is any real collective, unified demonstration.
Yes.
Beyond the boycott, beyond the great bus boycott, which I credit for, you know, its role in terms of civil rights movement. But beyond that now, how do we now take that boycott to the next level in 2021 terms, 2021 terminology, 2021 facts? How do we then take it to the next level where it's not only seen but felt?
I have a very good opinion on that one. I believe ethnic discipline. I'm kind of mixing and matching things now. In other words, being on code with each other, right? We have to be in agreement first of all, and we have to recognize ourselves. We have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and realize that we are the power that they tap into to keep us under the same boot that we are finding ourselves under. We're empowering them to do that. That we are empowering our oppressor to oppress us. It's like we're on autopilot and don't realize that we are sick. Not sick as in like, you know, we're sick because it's COVID and whatnot. Mentally, we are suffering from a great amnesia of ourselves personally. So I would say being on code or uh, uh, ethnic discipline, where we're disciplining ourselves, to stop purchasing their products and only purchase ours. We want to boycott something. I mean, we can boycott a lot of different things. We can essentially stop buying one item and cause such a ripple in the economy that somebody's going to take notice. Stop shopping at Wendy's for once, right? The black man got the police called on him for being in the parking lot drunk. Now, mind you, he shouldn't have been drunk in the first place, but he was parked. A little weird parked, but he was parked. And if somebody didn't have to call the police on him, he wouldn't have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
So stop eating at Wendy's and watch how that affects the whole economy. Right? Little things. Start off with some little steps.
Listen, I also agree with Conscious Nash, who suggested it seems that everyone wants their individualness, their individual personality, their individual want and need in place of, cultural rising. We want to maintain a certain level of independence that we have learned from the oppressor, that we have learned from the Western culture. And
he learned that from us. He learned that sort of behavior, that individuality from us, because all of the African nations are all individuals,
mm-hmm.
but they are still on code. Being on code and being individual is two different things.
Mm-hmm.
That's two entirely different things. We can't categorize that as the same thing, same nutshell. We are individual. That's what makes us powerful. We harness that whole aspect of being individuals. You have more than 400 some odd gods. Pick one. They're all part of the same pantheon.
Yeah, and that kind of reinforces my point, because let's look at ancient Egypt. Let's look at Kemet. Let's look at the diversity of deities and spirits and powers. But the minute Akhenaten, some of you might call him Moses, the minute Akhenaten stepped out and did something out of the norm, out of the system, he and Nefertiti were attacked for it. They try to remove their name from history because of it. So I agree with you that there's a great diversity in the motherland. There's great diversity in the indigenous world, but there's a village mindset. I'm almost scared to use that word village because everybody uses it now. Even your white liberal politician at 5 o'clock news uses the word village now. But from a more indigenous perspective, we've lost that. We've been forced into, and particularly because of enslavement. If you didn't pull your weight, that could affect all of us. But at the same time, if you didn't pull your weight and they were going to whip you and I could stay out of the fray, then I stayed out of the fray. So it reinforced us looking out for me, myself, and I, looking out only for yourself. In some cases, not even for your household. You have members within the household in competition of a faked, outside enforced sense of competition. I'm also old enough to remember Julia, Diane Carroll, Julia, and the whole idea of the Black woman having to maintain house and maintain family and maintain a lie so that the government would continue to give them food stamps and welfare and care, as long as there was no trace of a man in the house. I'm old enough to remember that divisive tool to sort of break up the Black family and families of color.
I'm a little worried about that part right there. Like honestly, when was that actually a requirement? Because if you remember the first Great Depression, white people are the ones that invented that welfare program. That is a construct. That's their shit.
It was created. Yes.
That was some stuff that they created for them. Then when we started being able to qualify for that, there was a stipulation the stipulation was that exact thing that you just said, that the black man can't be in the house, because then if the black man is in the house, then there's an income that is too great to qualify for that assistance, right? But that doesn't apply when they ask for uh, uh, welfare. As a matter of fact, both man and female, or husband and wife, can both separately be on welfare and receive aid if you're white.
Electro vibes. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you. We're not supposed to be rugged individuals. I don't
No,
believe that ever the way nature created us. I won't say God, I'm going to say nature. And when we look at indigenous people around the world, Asia, the Americas, before they were the corrupted Americas, Africa, you know, survival was contingent upon unity, working together. We even see that mimicked in the animal kingdom, you know, where certain animals have learned to work together. Certain insects have learned to work together for the benefit of the village, for the benefit of the whole. And so I agree with Electro Vibes that we were not intended to be rugged, individualistic. That's a Western cultural notion.
yeah, they took
Mhm.
our survival and kind of put their spin on it, and
Mhm.
now, now that they've kind of discarded it, that's what we've picked up, just trying to mirror what the standard of living is, but learning yourself,
Yeah.
learning who you are, learning it will essentially make you run into the great big uh, um, idea of the fact that we are all one people.
Mhm.
I laugh when my daughter loves Moana, right? It's a kind of sidebar. She loves Moana, but I like it because I get to the chance to nitpick the details in it when she gets older, like the coconut people in that movie. How is that not the Guinea people?
Okay.
What?
I'm laughing
Like,
because you are really, really thinking that far ahead that you're exposing your child
I'm exposing my
stuff
child to all of these little things.
the stuff that you plan to have deep discussions about when she's 10, 11, and 12. Right?
Yeah. Yes. So I got her watching Black is King, Lion King, Moana, Princess Tiana, and the Princess and the Frog. Oh yeah, I'm kind of indoctrinating her a little bit, so I could, when she comes with these questions later on, I'm ready because I already set those questions up in her mind.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think
Right?
there's anything wrong with that. Both of my parents, light and darkness, both of my parents believed in treating us as adults. And in today's society, today's politically correct society, that don't sound good. You know, well, I treat my kids like adults. But that's what my dad would say. That was one of his favorite things to say in describing his children to other people. And so how that translated in the house was different, whether it came from my mom or my dad. When it came from my dad, then it meant no sympathy, no empathy, uh, no hands-on instruction. You know, do what I say, hear what I say, jump, how high. With my mother, it was more specific, just as you described. You know, we went to the theater, we went to the museum, we went to the library, we went to see orchestra and opera. You know, she exposed us to things that gave us an opportunity to be free thinking, but also self thinking, as opposed to sort of group think. I think where we
Yeah.
fall apart, Electro Vibes, I wish you would call in because you have great comments. Electro
Yeah.
Vibes.
I still have some things that I have to go and get to. I'm gonna have to cut my time short today, but yeah, I couldn't help but to chime in on this one because I believe deeply in my heart that we have a lot of waking up to do, but it's not waking up like we need to be conscious. We are in a state of amnesia. There's a bigger contextual idea of not remembering who we are. Because we can be conscious as we want. That's not going to help us to get through the door of that wokeness. It's only a door. We need to walk through it and discuss what's on the opposite side of that woke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The Goddess Initiative. I know I said Julia. Now, Julia is where the Black woman was being introduced to the workspace, right? And Claudine was more about the Black woman in relation to the system. I think I got that. But help me out if I got it twisted. Okay. Yeah.
All right. I'll say everybody, have a blessed one.
All is a blessing. Yeah. Yeah, those are good points. The Goddess Initiative. So I think there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect with our sort of Western way of looking at the world now. And to be quite honest, this won't be popular. Not that a lot of what I say is really popular. We won't be able to get that back. We won't ever be able to get that back. I think it's healthy to reminisce. It's healthy to remember. It's sort of healthy to go back every now and then in an appropriate balance of things. But I don't think we'll ever recapture that, regain that. And Electro Vibes, I think it's inevitable that we will take on a more web-like, network-like ability at the community. I think it's being fostered from both sides. We're doing it and becoming it for survival, but I think they're doing it because that's just the technology and the direction that we're headed. When I think of movies like Escape to New York, for instance, which was post-apocalyptic, I think New York City was destroyed by a Third World War, something or another, with oh my goodness, what's the actor? I've worked with him so many times. What's the actor's name? Oh wow, I should be embarrassed, but I'm not embarrassed. But oh wow, not Arnold Schwarzenegger, the other one. Oh wow, that is so offensive that I can't remember his name right now. I've gotten so many paychecks from this man. John Travolta, Escape to New York. And it was about, a post-apocalyptic scenario in America. Some of what is reminiscent to Octavia Butler's book. I sent many of you on a journey early on in the COVID-19 to read Octavia Butler's book. I know some of you have. I know some of you are still trying to get it together. Crystal Lynn Witt, I'm not understanding your question. Supported by, exploited, you mean supported the exploitation of others. If that's what you're saying, yeah, I agree with you. Rugged individualism does produce a level of abuse, an accepted abuse, an overlooked abuse of women, of children, of the weak, of the infirmed, of the needy. When we think of the impoverished communities in our nation, they pay more for everything from food to utilities. And particularly when you live in the food deserts, which is one of the neighborhoods that I live in, is a food desert. We've got the corner store, you got cigarettes and beer and soda pop and candy, but we have to go a few miles outside of our community to find vegetables, to find produce, to find fresh meat, if you're a meat eater, etc. So it is all a part of a program that's really being fostered and promoted from the top down. I can remember a time when, we had less time for mother to be at home with the children, you know, because she now had to not only take care of the rent and the bills, you know, but now carry the weight of the absent father in the household. I also remember a time where that responsibility was systematically dumped onto the grandmothers, and the grandmothers took on that weight, particularly during the crack epidemic, and all of that responsibility fell down on the backs of the mothers and the grandmothers who held things together. You know, while people were off on their little crack binge and lost their mind. I can remember a time when the grandmothers had started smoking crack. I'm talking about 2000, right around towards the end of when we stopped hearing about crack and then started hearing about, you know, meth and pills and other crazy levels of drug activity. So there are all sorts of, I'm gonna use the Goddess Initiative's word, social experiments that go on that encourage one behavior and discourage another, that encourage one activity and discourage another, that encourage one food item and discourage another, with a systematic goal in mind, you know, to slow us down, to make us less active, to make us less able to learn. I can remember the lead epidemic, when lead was a big thing, you know, and they were finding lead in all of the public schools, and particularly the public schools in the, you know, the impoverished communities. I can remember that. So with time comes experience, comes wisdom, comes history, comes a level of awareness that you just don't appreciate as you're growing, when you're younger, as you're coming along, you know. And so you're always, no matter what your age, no matter how young, how old, you're always, in a sense, playing catch up to what's happening, while what's happening is in full swing, while what's happening never stops, while the chess game of oppressor versus the oppressed, victimizer versus the victims never ceases in human activity. But we had this learning curve that we have to endure, and particularly as people of color. We're always the last to know, the last to find out, the last to be informed, you know, and then we want to take action. And at that point, you know, it's already too late in many cases, or you're now exerting energy that could otherwise be better applied if we could come together, if we could have a sort of a collective goal. How easy is it to say that life is a collective goal? We all want to live. How easy is it to say, you know, food is a collective goal? We all need to eat. You know, we all need to survive. We all need to feed each other and our families and our children. You know, how easy is it to find collective goals that transcend politics, that transcend ethnicity? These are things that are not unique, you know, to just America. Africa, and us calling it Africa, and this sort of sense of unified Africa, is a new thing. I would think that my brothers and sisters look at themselves through a prism first of their own family, their own community, their own ethnic group. We don't have that in the US. We've been given race in the US. We've been given class and classism in the US. The haves and the have-nots in the US. And it doesn't matter how ignorant you are if you have. As long as you have, you can be as ignorant as you want to be. Ignorance tends to hurt you more the less you have, the less you own, the less you have power over. But you can be as ignorant as you want. You can be as backward as you want in the Western system. You can be as uninformed as you want in the Western system, as long as you are one who has. It is the have-nots that pay twice. It is the have-nots that pay double. And when we look at, you know, sort of the artificially organized minority groups, you know, Black is a minority, woman is a minority, gay, lesbian, transgender is a minority, you know, in the context of a global population where we are indeed part of the larger group, indeed part of the larger makeup of humanity. But we allow a particular power, a particular person, a particular ruler, a particular government, a certain degree of power over us in exchange for what we say is order, in exchange for convenience, depending on where you are in the world. Water is a lot more convenient here than maybe in the Sahel. Produce might be a lot more convenient here than maybe in Morocco, you know, and we get locked into the business of just survival wherever you are in the world. I have to remind my Nigerian and my Ghanaian brothers and sisters that we struggle. America is not, you know, a melting pot of gold nugget. You know, we work, we struggle every day, you know, in America. I have a friend now who's a vendor in Ghana, has a booth where he, you know, vends his items from. I know vending. We have vending here in the U.S. But now there's a construction going on, road construction coming through. So I asked, you know, what do you do now? Do you find new location? Do you find new job? And what do you do in the dynamics of coronavirus, COVID-19? So we take for granted water. We take for granted, you know, space, grass. You know, if you have grass, be grateful. I would prefer you were growing food. But if you got grass, trees, shrubberies, be grateful. Show gratitude. But we spend a lot of time fussing over, arguing over. And I think that comes from, again, living in the West. We do have a sense of entitlement in the West. We do have a sense of, you know, having not to worry about wood or water or fuel or food, you know, from the time you wake up until the time, you know, you go to bed. So we have time, joy, we have time here in the West for foolishness. We have time to make up rumors. We have time to be concerned about what celebrities are doing and who they're doing. We have time to be concerned about Pokemon and Dragon Balls and all this other stuff. But we also have time to embed a demonstration of our knowledge within everything that's in us and around us. And as the goddess is suggesting that, you know, we can look at TV and movie and film and cartoons and see some of this higher knowledge, this higher information being sort of masked within it. But it's up to us to truly indeed activate it and to move it forward. Conscious Nash trying to usher in the new Black youth to perceive the world as hostile for them, and also hitting on a different program of slavery for them to see where you cannot see people smile or express. Yeah, I'm real curious as to where you live, Conscious Nash, because that could also apply to some of the communities that I'm witnessing in West Africa. Almost the desire for hope is strangled out of them. The desire for any level of advancement, a desire for any level of escape, other than, you know, to make it to the UK or to make it to America, you know, or to have some American, you know, gift them a nugget of gold because they think we're all rich. And I think that's an important concept that the African in America needs to grasp. That when you do start looking at outside of the US, they think we're all rich. And we should be. They think we should be. And if you're not, What's wrong with you? That feeds some of that negative energy that exists between Nigerians and African Americans, for instance, who are often highly degreed, highly educated, um, brown sticky buns that you're describing. My mom, my grandmother kept my mother in the house and shielded until my mother went to college. And then, of course, my mom went to college and married my dad, and that's when all hell broke loose. But and of course, this happened during the '60s, going into the late '60s, going into the 1970s. So there's an opportunity for you. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're a seeker, the fact that you're researching, studying, looking for, and have access to the internet. There's an opportunity that lies there for you that did not exist for my mother and for my mother and my grandmother's generation. Yeah, consciousness is only one part. If we can't exercise it, if we can't move it, if we can't put it to use, our youth need to be protected, yes, along with our families. And I'm not sure how we're going to rebuild that. I really don't. I still believe in the it takes a village concept. I still try to live by it takes a village concept. The call-in number is area code 845-277-9143. 845-277-9143. But the problem with that is that, you know, I like to say sometimes to my brothers and sisters in the hoods, you know, that sometimes you hug the block, but the block does not hug back. And so my dream would be that the village hugs back. And I think from our Western perspective, African Americans in particular, when we think of village and we look across the Atlantic to Africa, again, we think we're seeing this unified, you know, Black power, the way we've digested it in the West. And you're still talking about varying countries, varying geographic landscapes, varying ethnic groups, varying families that don't have sort of that unified African American concept the way that we do. And so I think we don't look realistically sometimes at some of the challenges that exist, even in a Black-headed nation, a government, you know, ruled by Black rulers, African rulers. And we've seen that go awry. We've seen that go wrong. We also have to consider the outward manipulation still of the European unions and the in the West America in maintenance of peace on the continent. So I think we have to look at our consciousness, but we have to re-examine how we view race and unification. And that's why I say we need to find unity in much more simpler things like water, for instance. Read Octavia Butler's book. Water is a problem now. Water will continue to be a problem. Water will only be much more of a problem in the next 50 years, in the next 100 years. We need to look at self-sustainability. How can we feed ourselves? We've lost connection to nature. We've lost connection to Mother Earth. We've lost connection to where our food comes from. So these are all arenas that we would have to look at, that we would have to consider moving forward. And I'm proud of all of you who are here in this space right now, whether you agree with me or don't. But the fact that you're here and your number is up on the board, you know, lets me know that there's a whole generation coming behind me of children and grandchildren who will have a different mindset about self-sustainability. about allowing ourselves to continue to be enslaved, you know, through things that control our food and our housing, you know, and where we can live, you know, and how we can live. So I'm grateful for you, the Goddess Initiative, and all the parents in the room who are instructing and teaching and sharing um, for the next generation. Tasha's Touch and Crystal, Escape to New York, that was Kurt Russell. I thought for sure that was John Travolta. Somebody looked that up. I thought for sure that was John Travolta, but I could be wrong. Escape to New York. I don't remember that being Kurt Russell. I really don't. Brown Sticky Buns. It's, oh, beloved, it's so much deeper than that now, though. And if I had my way, everyone who pays taxes, everyone who has a Social Security number would have a free DNA test. If I had my way. If I had my way. I think it would change the very dynamic of how we view race and ethnicity in America. All is a blessing, beloved. All is a blessing. There's always going to be experimentation, y'all. I mean, ever since the beginning of time, there's been experimentation. I remember when the FOI used to teach that the Yakub created diversity of humanity in a scientific lab, that the white man was created in a scientific lab. So there's always been, and probably always will be, scientific experimentation. Some of us alien enthusiasts might even say that that is embedded in our DNA makeup from our alien ancestors. Thank you for being on the phone lines, callers. If you have a question or a comment, I need you to press that number 1 so that I can unmute your mic. Got quite a few people on the phone line. So I'm going to call out your area code first. If I have more than one person within that area code, then I'll call out your area code and your first 3, but never your last 4. So I'm opening the mic now for area code 937. Area code 937. Who's calling, beloved, and where are you calling from? Oh, great. Thank you so much, bruh. I appreciate you. Your comments, your questions, your input has been very beneficial to the show. So I'm very happy to have you on the phone line. I appreciate that. I appreciate you. All is a blessing. Mm-hmm. And how would you speak to how that has been sort of manipulated here in the West? You know, we sort of replaced a sense of family or ethnic pride with, you know, either a national pride or a false sense of national pride. Some would even call it patriotism now. You know, some even lead with religion. You know, they're American and they're Christian. They don't see nothing outside of that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I appreciate that, beloved. For some reason, because we're using Skype, they can't hear you. I heard you, and yeah, I heard you clearly. And I'm not sure how I can amplify the sound anymore for the audience than what it is. But I appreciate your comments. I'll I'll try to speak to them a little bit more in the chat so that they found fully understand what you just said. But I agree with you 100%. We've lost a sense of village, and that's by design. Just like we've lost a sense of family, that is also by design, and it affects us worse as African Americans for obvious reasons. But I'm not in denial that it is an American condition, that it is a Western condition. Like you, I have family in Ohio. I grew up in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I was born in Chicago. I was born in Chicago. I have family in Michigan. So I got family all over. From the Gullah Geechee to the deep, deep South. So I've seen the effects of this division, not just in the Black family. It shows up in all families. And families are deeply divided now over politics, over religion, over being Jehovah Witness or not, being Catholic or not, being blue or red or even green or not. So I don't have a whole lot of hope in us sort of rebuilding, sort of an ancestral sense of village. I think the awareness is necessary. The study is necessary. The teaching of it is necessary, but it's going to look like something we haven't seen before. It's going to congeal and manifest in a way that meets where we are today, with the technology and with the mindset of the people. I'm finding now, at least in my house, an overwhelming flood, a welcome flood of people 32 and over, 32, 33 and over. Yeah, who are now stepping away from American tradition, stepping away from quote unquote church and religion in the way that it has formally been presented to us. So I'm very hopeful, as I said early in the show, that there indeed will be a new day. There indeed will be a different consciousness. And when we look at what's happening right now in Portland and in other parts of the world where the protesting is still happening, the media gets bored after a while. So the media gets bored. If it's not enough fires, if it's not enough people getting shot and killed, the media returns back to the old stuff. They move right on back into Wendy Williams and hip hop and the entertainment. So you think ain't no protesting going on. You think things have quieted down, but things aren't quiet, people. Things aren't quiet. Things aren't settled, and and I am hopeful. Yeah, and I am hopeful that we are not going back. We are definitely going forward into a very different day, a very different time. And go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. It's not. It's not. Yeah. It's a new way. It's a new day. It's a new life. Thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate you. Area codes. Yes, I appreciate you, bro. I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it. All is a blessing. Yeah, I appreciate people who support, people who listen, people who put the words into practice, people who are standing in their truth. I would be, trying to fool you if I said I didn't appreciate people like you a little bit more, who have listened for some time, who have had a chance to digest all the stuff that I can throw out in the course of a 2-hour show, and who know that I'm standing in the truth. And so that I appreciate. You helped me to battle back. You helped me to fight back, the nonsense that we're up against, and to ensure that your children know better, that your children know the truth. Yes, you have to. Give thanks. I'm here. I say this all the time. All is a blessing, beloved. I say this all the time. I'm here to make priests, priestesses, successful ministries, successful business owners who are operating authentically in what's already in our blood and what's already us. I'm not here to be in competition with or against tourism, entertainment, performance, which I am a part of. Halloween may or may not happen this year. I'm sure it'll be a lot of pictures up. I'll have my picture up too. But there has to be a place where we begin to take us more seriously. And that includes not only just our survival, being able to have an encounter with the police or a security guard, or go into a public place without, threat of the police, or security, or someone responding to us, in sort of ethnic, racial kind of way. Yes. Yeah, yeah, that's my experience. I'm just a decade older than you, beloved. But that's been my experience. Um, there are many people listening to us right now who are really interested in my past, who are really interested in my story. So y'all better listen up. That's how I ended up moving to the South. That's how I ended up moving South permanently, was because of 9/11. When 9/11 happened, I was living in a high-rise building in Chicago and State Street. Some of y'all know the building. Chicago and State Street is where I lived. It was a Burger King on one corner. It was another shop on another corner. They've changed that around a little bit, but that building is still standing, and as far as I know, it's still occupied. That's where I lived when the planes hit the World Trade 9/11. That's where I was. And from that moment on, as I got on the train, went out in public, all of a sudden I wasn't Rasta, because many people looked at, the length of my dreadlocks at that time, how I dressed, how I looked, and they assumed I was Jamaican, they assumed I was Rasta. But once 9/11 hit, they started calling me Abdul. They started calling me Muhammad. You know, you calling me out of my name. You know, I'm not even Arabic. You know, you calling me out of my name, you know. And so I felt that threat that many Black men feel right now with the police. I felt that threat for the first time in my life. And that's what pushed me to finally move south and not move back north again. I had made up in my mind that, particularly after having read, beloved, I'm live on the radio. I'm gonna have to call you back. I'm live on the radio. I'm losing my train of thought. It's coming back to me. Yeah, I was Abdullah. Yeah, people started looking at me like I was a terrorist. And that was the final straw. You know, I had came and visited. I had stayed in Atlanta for a while. I had gone back and forth, but that was the final straw. That and reading Octavia Butler's book, Parable of the Sower. That was the final. I need you to read that book. I want to talk about the book, but I've asked so many people in the audience to read the book, so I don't want to go into detail about it. Yeah, but Parable of the Sower, S-O-W-E-R, Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Now, read that book and then reimagine 9/11, and that's what made me move south. That was the final impetus to get me to move south. I felt like if we were going into a bad case scenario, one, I needed to be where I knew I wasn't going to starve. I needed to be where I knew I could grow something, harvest something. By all means, kill something if I have to. You know, like a dove, a pigeon, a rabbit, a squirrel, you know. But I also felt I wanted to be around other like-minded people who understood me. So that meant Black people, African people, Hispanic people, some white people, so some ethnic-minded people who understand land usage, survival, and then that word we've been talking about through the show, village. Village. The South gave me that. New Orleans gave me that. From day one, I felt like I was in the village from day one. Now, that doesn't always mean that everybody like you. That wouldn't be the reality in Ghana or Nigeria. You know, I post a lot of West African news every single day because I want our people to have that understanding. This isn't a romantic attraction to Africa. This isn't a romantic relationship with Orisha. You know, this is really about our survival as African people wherever we are on the planet. Wherever we are on the planet. So we're in Norway, we're in Germany, we're everywhere. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, yeah. You're near, so now you're where I grew up. I was raised, meaning educated, in the PG County, Prince George's County, Maryland. And again, I'm sharing my story because there are people listening who are really concerned about my story. So my dad was a bigamist, quite possibly a polygamist, had more than one family. And so he moved my mother and her two children, which is me and Wapani, to Maryland, to PG County, so that we wouldn't have direct contact with Ohio or Chicago, which is where a great deal of my family is. I got brothers and sisters in Ohio I have never met. Hey, y'all. Columbus, Ohio. Yeah. Many of them have the last name Harris, and some of them have the last name Broomfield. So that's how we ended up in Maryland. Okay. And so I stayed in Maryland until I ran away from home at 14. So that's where I grew up. My mother is a retired school teacher from Southern Maryland. So when you think of Anne Arundel County, Shadyside, Annapolis, MacArthur Middle School on the naval base, you know, those are all my old stomping grounds from where I grew up. That's where I learned about Gullah Geechee. That's where I learned about Gullah Geechee culture. That's where I learned that there was indeed Southern voodoo footprint as far north as Maryland, as far north as Virginia, as far north as the Carolinas. That's where I first learned that. I didn't get grown and grow up and move to New Orleans to get into voodoo. Voodoo was the first conversation that I can remember as an infant being discussed among the women in the house was voodoo. So I don't think people understand, particularly people who don't live in the South or don't live in this region, and even some people who live in the South but maybe haven't explored it like a tourist, don't quite get the level of culture and African culture that still exists in the South among Black people, both known and unknown. So that's how I got here. That's what pushed me to be here. And as I said earlier, I was embraced from day one. When I got off the Greyhound bus in New Orleans, I was at home. I was at home. I didn't feel any threat. I didn't feel any danger. Nobody was after me, not even the police. I've never had a problem with the police in New Orleans, ever. Not ever. Not one time. And I'm not saying that other brothers, I'm not saying that other brothers haven't. I'm not saying that. I'm not suggesting that we don't have a systemic problem in the Black community all across America as it relates to the police. But personally, I didn't have that problem, and particularly in New Orleans. So, I'm not perceived as a threat. You know what I mean? I try to be. And I limit my interaction with them. So I'm saying if I have to interact with them, I try to keep it as short and concise as possible. Yeah, I agree. And it's unfortunate that in 2021, you know, we got athletes breaking down now on TV. And between you and I, between you and I, I think they should have been did that. These Black actors, these Black athletes, these Black public leaders, they should have been broke down. Force emotion to the surface. Make these people feel. Listen, I appreciate you, beloved, but I'm going to have to end the show. I've got to respond to this appointment, but I appreciate you. You've brought a lot to the show. I invite you, if you had the time, to come back and be with us a little bit more regularly on the show. I would certainly appreciate that. And hopefully in the future, we can fix it where the audience can hear you a little more clearly. But thank you so much. All is a blessing. Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate all of you, no matter where you are, for being, for being, and then two, for being present in this present moment in time space. We have an opportunity now more than any time in history to make real concrete changes for ourselves, our families, for each other, for our communities. I'm grateful for those who are doing the work. Our ancestors are our front line of defense. Front line of defense. I wish people would take pride in the blessings that voodoo presents and not just what's scary about voodoo. Not just blood and sacrifice. Voodoo is not meant to be scary. Voodoo needed to be scary during the revolution. Voodoo needed to be scary during the period of enslavement. But we are now in a position where we need to be focusing on healing, self-empowerment, and having something to pass down to the next generation so that 40 years from now, it's not another riot. It's not another police killing. It's not another protest. It's not another march. We've got to move this forward to the next level. And so I'm going to close out the show because I've got to respond to this appointment. And I'm going to offer up a song that my friend in Ghana produced a few years back about folks roaming through the church looking for solutions. Ain't no solution there. All is a blessing. Peace.